welcome to Quick channel. In today's video we'll be building a somewhat unconventional diorama. It is based on one of my favorite Star Wars scenes and combines two of my favorite hobbies, miniature painting and building Lego. For this build I chose Duel and Mustafar Lego kit. After getting all of the parts out, I've tossed the manual because who needs those? I piled everything up nicely, and then after using some ancient magic, we've got ourselves an assembled piece. It's a pretty cool Lego kit. It has multiple options how it can be displayed. It also has a lot of moving parts like platforms and whatever that thing is. Even though this little Lego diorama displays a pretty cool moment from the movie, it wouldn't really work with what I had in mind. So I had to take it apart. On Rebrickable.com I found instructions for an alternative build that would work a lot better with the vision that I had in mind. I wanted to create a diorama of my favorite moment from the trilogy where Anakin and Obi-Wan are having a dialogue on the bank of a lava river, moments before Anakin lost his legs and got severely burned because of his own arrogance. After following the instructions, I've got a perfect replica of the terrain from the movie, but in a Lego format. Later on, I've made some changes to the build behind the camera, but they're pretty minor. So this is how alternative build looks like. We have Obi-Wan on the high ground, and then we have Anakin standing on the platform. What I want to create is an illusion of more realistic diorama changing into a Lego diorama, or vice versa. For that, I'll need to split it in approximately half, but I'm not sure which way I'll split it yet. I have an option to split it horizontally or diagonally. I will need to figure it out later and pick whichever option will work best. Lego kit came with this pretty cool Anakin Lego figure that I'll need to replace with this 3D printed, more realistic looking Anakin that I've ordered from Etsy. I have also found this 3D render of a platform from the movie. It is actually an STL file that you can buy, but I don't have a 3D printer. I'll use it as a reference to build my own from scratch. I will need to make my platform a little bit wider and longer compared to this piece, because platform from the movie has more of a rectangular shape compared to this Lego platform. Using Lego platform as a reference for the dimensions, I've marked out my measurements on a sheet of foam core. I'm using a regular dollar store bought sheet of foam core. It will work great to build up the base of our platform. After that, I grabbed myself a thin piece of styrene, then I cut it out. Styrene is an amazing material to work with for scratch building. It comes in a lot of different shapes, textures, sizes, and thicknesses. I've cut this piece with a little bit of a overhang all around over the base platform. Behind the camera, I've also glued some styrene strips around the perimeter of the foam core to cover the foam sides. And then I grabbed the same styrene strips, marked the size to fit them on the side of the platform, and cut them into little square pieces. And then I glued them to the platform on both left and right side of the platform. Another thing that I need to do is I need to build this ridge that goes all around the perimeter of the platform, and I've decided to use these rectangular styrene pieces. The only thing is they're hollow on the inside, so I'll have to cover the back with the styrene strips. For most of the build, I'm using CA glue to glue styrene parts together. I also use glue accelerator to speed up glue drying time. I've cut two pieces of styrene on a 45-degree angle. There is a little bit of a gap when they connect together, but it's not a big deal. It is easily fixable by using some putty and sanding with sandpaper. I did the same thing on all four corners, and then I cut some really thin styrene strips, cut them into shorter pieces, and glued them to the sides of the corners that we've just made. And it gave me this grill looking design that the platform has on the sides of the ridges. I glued them all around on all of the sides and moved on to the next step. Next thing that I needed to do is to replicate pattern on top of the platform. I decided to use the same styrene strips that I used before. I feel like the width of them matches perfectly the design on the platform. I'll just cut them and glue them on an angle on the platform in 3 rows. I've glued these 4 small pieces of styrene in each corner, and then I cut them on an angle just to make those areas less boring. It wasn't my original plan, so it was a little bit trickier to cut them into angular pieces after I already glued them to the platform, but it worked out just fine in the end. I've continued on to gluing styrene strips to the platform. I've glued bottom and top row first. This way it'll be easier for me to make sure that the middle row is spaced out equally from top and bottom. Platform on the reference picture has this triangle piece in the lower part, but it wouldn't really work with the design that I ended up with. So I shaped it a little bit differently, but I feel like it still keeps the same look. I was partially inspired for this build by Adam Savage videos on his Tested channel. He has a bunch of videos where he works with styrene and he builds things from scratch, and I would highly recommend to check it out if you're interested in that kind of stuff. He also has a ton of other videos worth watching. So this is the final result for the top part of the platform. It's a little bit different from the reference, but it still sticks to the same idea. I had to bust out my Back to the Future DeLorean kit that I'll totally build one day, even though I had it for like 3 years now. I needed to get some bits of sprue from this kit to use for the next part of the platform. I've added some small details behind the camera, like this little bar that's sticking out in the front and this little step platform, as well as those little pins on the sides that I've built using those pieces of sprue that I've cut out from the DeLorean kit. They're meant to represent this round part, whatever that is. I've used styrene rods to replicate the bars that go under the platform. I have no idea what the function of that thing is, so if you know, let me know in the comments. I've measured and cut the cross section. And then using smaller sprue pieces, I glued everything together. After that, I just needed to add these side pieces here. I'm guessing those are the pieces that help platform hover in the air over the lava. I'm using thicker styrene strip to make this connector between the platform and the hover engine, I guess? And then I used thinner styrene strips and rectangular pieces to build the hovery thingies. Behind the camera, I've built the second one for the other side of the platform. So that's platform about 90% done. The only thing that was left to do is to build the, I'm assuming, control panel for the platform. The 3D render image is actually mirrored because in the movie the control panel is in the opposite corner of the platform. I've actually used spare Lego pieces for this part to build up the main structure, and then I built upon it with really thin styrene rods. I've used the same rods for all the levers and handles and buttons on the control panel. To build structure that control panel is sitting on, I've used thicker styrene rods, and I heated them up to bend them into desirable shape. When the building part was done, I moved on to painting. I primed the whole thing in black, and then using airbrush I put a base coat of gray. I've also sprayed black in random spots to simulate burnt effect. I've painted white from below to replicate light coming from the lava river, and then I gave it some yellow and red to create this warm glow. Unfortunately, I lost some of the footage somehow, but I've added some weathering by dry brushing metallic paints and adding some oil washes and rust effect. After the platform was done, I moved on to painting Anakin. Just like with the platform before, I primed him with black using my airbrush. I spray painted some dark brown. And then I went back with the regular brush and painted all the black parts of his outfit. I've painted his waistband with a little bit of a different shade of brown, because why not? And then I went on to painting his face, hands and hair. I chose a little bit of a too bright of a blonde color for his hair, but I'll fix that later. I washed his skin with a mix of purple and red just to give it life and make it more realistic. I applied black wash to his outfit to establish shadows and bring out all the details of the sculpt. Then I did the same thing to his hair to make it a little bit darker and make it closer to what it looks like in the movie. I went back with skin color to bring back highlights on his face and his hand. After that, it was time to paint his lightsaber. I put a base coat of white and I made sure that the whole surface is nicely covered. To give it a blue light, I applied thin, translucent blue paint. And to simulate glow effect from the saber, I used white paint through my airbrush and applied it to the surfaces that would be lit by the light from the saber. Then I used the same translucent blue paint and sprayed it over the white areas to give it a blue hue. Behind the camera I used the same technique to give the whole miniature a red glow from below, and then with my brush I highlighted all the raised areas with orange or very bright blue to simulate light hitting the edges of the outfit. The last thing that was left to do is to build and paint Diorama base. I started out by masking out the area that will stay in its LEGO format. I was prepping it for priming before I applied texture to create lava effect. But now that I'm thinking about it, it was probably a waste of time because a texture piece would probably adhere to the surface without priming it, but I guess it doesn't really matter now. So I went on with priming the part of the diorama that I'll be changing. So I decided to split the diorama somewhat diagonally. I wanted to keep the river bank and a little bit of the lava river intact in its LEGO form, and then create an effect of it slowly changing into more of a realistic diorama. So yeah, pretty much all of the priming that I'm doing right now on the screen is somewhat for nothing. But we can pretend that it will actually help the adhesion of the texture in the future. Behind the camera, I've added texture to the surface. I've used this concrete texture piece from AK Interactive. When the texture dried, I primed it in black again. Apparently there are different types of lava flow, and the one that's in the movie and the one that I'm trying to replicate here is called Bahoy Hoy. I've spray painted all the cracks in the flow with white to simulate lava glow. I also did a semi-transparent path of white on the edges of cracks to create an illusion of light overspill. I covered all the white areas with red ink. After that, I used orange ink to paint just the cracks and little pools of lava. At this point, I wasn't really happy with the intensity of the glow, so I went back in with some ivory paint to bring up the brightness of the lava flow. And then I covered it up with some yellow ink. I made multiple passes to make yellow and orange as saturated as possible. I also sprayed just a tiny bit of ivory paint in the middle of the cracks and the very middle of the lava pools. For the final step, I used my brush to paint the brightest parts of the glow effect. Now it's time to take the masking tape off and paint the transition effect from LEGO to more realistic diorama. The same as the rest of the glowing effects that I've painted in this project, I started out with spraying some white paint. Then I covered it up with some blue ink. I also made sure that the glowing effect is covering both realistic part of the diorama and part of LEGO diorama. This will help to make the transition a lot smoother. I kept adding white to my original mix with blue ink, and I was making the area that I was covering smaller and smaller with every step, keeping the brightest parts to the middle of the transition. For the brightest part, I used a small brush to paint a very thin line with the pure white paint. And that was it for painting the diorama base. I've glued Anakin with the platform to the base using transparent flying base from one of the GW models. I've built a little display platform for the diorama using some foam core and styrene strips, and I primed it black. All I needed now is just Obi-Wan and his lightsaber.